Hello everyone. It is the day past Christmas, but by the time you watch this, it'll be a couple of days past that. So it's kind of like you're looking back into the past, which is really spooky. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my last video. The day I recorded it, I wasn't feeling that great, so when I watched it again, it was really boring. It was bleh, I was really quiet, and it just didn't deserve the pizzazz that a video for my favorite albums of the entire year deserved. So I'd like to apologize to those albums that I did not do justice. But I promise to do justice to the album I'll be talking about today. It's one that I've been waiting since the beginning of this year to discuss. The 1998 release by Neutral Milk Hotel, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. I had listened to this album before this year, and I acknowledged its greatness, but it wasn't really until I bought a physical copy around February and listened to it over and over again, sometimes on a daily basis, that I liked it as much as I do now. And for a while it was sort of a problem because I had no motivation to listen to newer music because it wasn't as good as this. Neutral Milk Hotel is an indie folk / psychedelic folk group from Louisiana, and they only released 2 albums during their career. The first was On Avery Island, which has kind of met middling reviews, and then their second, for some reason, was this classic, In the Aeroplane. It's definitely unusual that the band stopped making anything after such a great record, and there are a few ideas why, like maybe they realized they wouldn't make anything better, or they said everything they wanted to say on Aeroplane, or it revolves around the idea or the message of this album, which I'll get into later. But either way, their disappearance definitely fits into with the mysterious aura that this band has around it. Everything about Neutral Milk Hotel is peculiar. The band name is peculiar, the lyrics are out there, and they don't make any sense. The band is so small, and yet it produces this album that everyone, for some reason, considers to either be great or a total joke. It's not hard to see why opinions are so polarized. This album is definitely unique. Where else are you going to hear a record talking about ovaries milking with green fleshy flowers? The only word that comes to mind when describing lead singer Jeff Mangum's voice is whiny. He sounds like a man in his late 20s trying to sound like an 8-year-old girl. And it seems like half the lyrics that Neutral Milk Hotel uses are long vowels that really accentuate the bizarreness of Jeff Mangum's voice, like in the aeroplane over the sea, or seaman stains the mountain tops. You can probably tell from the 3 examples I've given you that the lyrics that are strewn on this album are ridiculous, they're impossible to envision, but no matter how incoherent they are, when you listen to the album, it feels like they fit into place just fine. The imagery on this album and the tone of Jeff Mangum's voice make this thing sort of sound like a fairy tale, albeit a very mature one. There are abstract ideas of death and war and separation of family, but they're all encrypted in these lyrics about milk and weird sexual themes and fire. If you want a more concise roadmap, this album was inspired by Anne Frank and her diary when the band went to visit her memorial. And there are plenty of lyrics, almost one in every song, that directly reference her or something about her life. If you choose to believe that this album is about Anne Frank, then that's fine. If you choose to believe that the album is inspired by Anne Frank, that's fine too, because they are, for sure, 2 completely different things. The main instrument of choice throughout In the Aeroplane is the acoustic guitar, but another aspect of this record is that the sound can't be pinpointed to one period of time. When you listen through it, you realize that it could have been recorded anywhere from 1960 to modern day, and you couldn't tell when. Because besides the acoustic guitar, which is timeless, there are other songs that have electric guitar with a grunge or garage element to it that are much more fast-paced than the acoustic ones, and there are a few instrumentals with horns and clarinets. The 10th track off of this album, the second instrumental, even features a modern-sounding altered effect, something that would be found maybe in a drone somewhere. This album really creates its own universe with its unique songwriting and instrumentation that can't really be found anywhere else. But again, the selling point of this has to be in the lyrics. For whatever reason, they convey such emotion without really saying anything tangible at all. You wouldn't believe how many times I've felt something about a brother with his head filled with flames ever since I started listening to this thing. And in general, I think the big emotional view of In the Aeroplane is sadness. There is a hanging morose that presides over these songs, but there are some, like most notably the title track In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, that are completely uplifting and optimistic and hopeful. And there are some others like Holland's 1945 that are just fun. With that being said, I think the fact that the centerpiece of this record, O Comely, and the closer, Two-Headed Boy Part 2, are both crushingly depressing, that gives the impression that that is the feeling that the band was going for to last from this record. The opening track, King of Carrot Flowers Part 1, to me seems like a easily digestible preview of what is to come in this album. It's really light and fluffy. It's exclusively acoustic guitar, and the chords are upbeat and familiar to the listener, so they can sort of acclimate themselves to the odd lyrics and odd nature of Jeff Mangum. The next song, King of Carrot Flowers Part 2 and 3, are a flash of the diversity to be found on In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, with Jeff Mangum screaming and utilizing his entire vocal range at the beginning of the song, talking about loving Jesus. And then Part 3 contains some of the fast-paced guitar that's on tracks like Holland and Ghosts. The next track, the title song, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, contains chords and lyrics that are sad like most of the other songs on here, but that isn't the mood of this song. This track in particular creates a resonating happiness when I listen to it. It makes me feel like I'm sitting in the sun on a warm summer day. On Two-Headed Boy Part 1, the tempo that is adopted and the strain that Jeff Mangum puts on his voice create an urgency that helps you empathize with whatever he's singing. And unlike on In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, where the lyrics were about laying in the sun, in this one, Jeff Mangum says the sun has passed, showing the contrast thematically and stylistically between these two songs towards the start of the album. The Fool is a great instrumental built around the brass horns that make up the body of the track. The song is slow, it lurches forward like a big boat out at sea, and is an example of the great ability to switch up the pace that Neutral Milk Hotel displays throughout this record. Holland 1945 is the closest thing to a rock song on this album. The guitars are plugged in, amped up. And on this song, Jeff Mangum doesn't really dwell on the lyrics. He doesn't glaze over them, but he rushes through them, and it actually gives them some liveliness. It's good to see some energy behind boys playing pianos filled with flames. The next song, Communist Daughter, is the most quiet piece found on this album. The vocals are especially soft, and the guitar is stripped down and replaced at some points with horns, which sort of make their own little instrumental segments. The serenity of Semen-Stained Mountaintops on Communist Daughter leads way into the unbelievably crushing song, and what I like to call the centerpiece of the album, where everything seems to be built around it, O Comely. On this song, Jeff Mangum painfully sings about really disgusting imagery, but gives it this foreign beauty, like when he's talking about fetuses or flesh-licking ladies or ovaries. Jeff Mangum seems right at home taking these uncomfortable visuals and making them into something poetic. As moving as the first 6 minutes of this song are, the final two take that to a whole other level with images of genocide and buried families and separation from family. And towards the conclusion, when Jeff is wailing literally at the end of this song, it just creates a harrowing ending to one of the saddest songs I have ever heard. Ghost is similar to Holland 1945. It is the other rock-ish song found on here. The guitar that opens up this song gives you the impression of being just drawn into something, and then once you are pulled completely into the song, it just hits you with this rush of guitar and lyrics and all the other sounds that accompany this track. There are more horns and noises everywhere and kazoo kind of sounding crap, and there's even a guitar solo, which is pretty cool. And this song even leads into another instrumental, which shows off some of Neutral Milk Hotel's psychedelic side with distorted sounds and a really atmosphere-focused side to this instrumental. The closer to this album, Two-Headed Boy Part 2, is the reason why I said Oh Comely is the second saddest song I've ever heard, because this closer takes the cake, really. The character being portrayed is apparently a boy who is separated from his family members, which sort of brings to mind the Holocaust imagery that is seen on most of this thing. And the fact that the acoustic guitar is the only instrument that appears on this song really promotes that feeling of isolation that the band was going after. The vocal performance here is probably the best on the entire album, which is just saying something. And as this song is dwindling down, after the last line, you can actually hear in the recording Jeff Mangum put the guitar down in the studio and walk out, a really nice cherry on top of this song and the entire record. I really don't have more to say about this. It's fantastically structured, it has great dynamics, great change in tempo, and it's perfect musically. The vocals, the instruments, and the chords are familiar enough and sweet enough to suck you in, but the album has enough strangeness to keep you interested throughout the entire 40 or so minutes that it runs. Everybody has their own narrative take on this record, so I'll give mine too. The line where the album title comes from brings this idea of leaving a part of you behind after death. Anyone can leave behind a piece of themselves or do something that will be remembered in the future even after they die, which is what Anne Frank did in her journal, which inspired this album. And to me, this album is what Neutral Milk Hotel has left behind to identify themselves. This is something that people connect with. This is something that people have a strong emotional attachment to. Since this group never released anything else, it seems clear to me that this is the lasting image they wanted of themselves, whether it be an album or a girl's diary or whatever. Every person has their own gift to the world to give, and this album, in my opinion, happens to be theirs. It's a testament to this album's greatness that such philosophical ideas can be taken away from an album that appears to be in coherence. I haven't said nearly enough about this record, but I've said about as much as I can say. In the Aeroplane Over the Sea is a masterpiece. It is one of 4 albums that I consider to be a perfect 10 out of 10. This is another one. If you've already heard it, tell me what you thought. If you haven't heard it, please listen to it. Please, I'll actually put a link to, I'm sure there's a full version up on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description box thingy. Please listen to it, and then let me know what you thought. That's all I have. Neutral Milk Hotel in the Aeroplane Over the Sea. We'll see what I review next.